Hi, everyone. I'm Tamron Hall. The News Nation is following several breaking developments in the Trayvon Martin shooting case. The special prosecutor announced that she will not use a grand jury to decide whether George Zimmerman will be charged with killing the unarmed teenager. Angela Corey's office released a statement only a few hours ago saying in part, quote, the decision should not be considered a factor in the final determination of the case. From the moment she was assigned, Ms. Corey noted she may not need a grand jury. At this time, the investigation continues. Meantime, these stirring images of student protesters outside of the Sanford Police Department only a few hours ago as well. It was an act of civil disobedience that forced the department to temporarily shut its doors.
Mama, mama, tell me why. Mama, mama, tell me why.
This group of about 50 students are gathered to demand that Zimmerman be arrested and also to criticize the police department for its handling of the case. NBC's Kerry Sanders is following the case. He joins us live from Sanford. So, Kerry, a lot of people are talking about the surprise direction when so many were anticipating a grand jury being convened. Give me the tick-tock of what happened here.
Well, that was the politically safe move to go to the grand jury, because Angela Corey could have taken the evidence that's been gathered by her and the FDLE, presented it to a grand jury, and come back with whatever sort of decision that they made. Instead, she has decided that she is going to decide on her own and announce whether there need to be charges or whether charges are not warranted. I think perhaps the biggest surprise here is that Angela Corey made a moment in her day, which is no doubt a very busy day, to make a phone call down to the police department, which is just a short distance from here, where those dream defenders, those people that you just showed, were gathered and sitting in sort of a civil disobedience, quietly protesting. She invited some of them in, and they actually had an opportunity to talk to her on the phone, where she told them to please be patient, take their time, understand that the process is indeed in full swing here, and that there will be some movement, but no mention of any sort of timetable. By taking this off of the grand jury, it also sort of leaves it a little bit loose in terms of a timetable, although it is possible, if there is going to be an announcement, we could see something this week. We believe that because Angela Corey has been heavily involved as a special prosecutor with FDLE agents, trying to gather as much evidence. Now that she has moved to the point where she can decide, I'm not taking this to the grand jury, I can make a phone call down and speak to these protesters, she has moved into another phase where it's possible the analysis and the team analysis, although ultimately the decision less rests with her, the team analysis is in process, and so now she's moving towards making a final decision.
All right, Kerry, thank you very much. And now that there will not be a grand jury, the special prosecutor can decide, as you heard Kerry say, either to file charges herself or drop the case altogether. Joining me now, nationally syndicated radio talk show host Michael Smerconish, who's also an MSNBC contributor, as well as Kendall Coffey, a former U.S. attorney, and criminal defense attorney John Burris. Thank you all for joining me. Kendall, because you were based in Florida, or you, I should say, are based in Florida, let me get your response to Kerry Sanders saying that this was the politically safe move in this case to not have this grand jury.
Well, I think the politically safer move would have been to have a grand jury say, I presented the evidence, they decided charges, they decided no charges. That gives the prosecutor a little bit of cover. Instead, what she's decided she's going to do is make the decision herself, which means that there's going to be public reaction either way, strong public reaction, and I give her all the credit for it, because at the end of the day, she's the special prosecutor appointed by the governor. She ought to make the decision, and it's going to be a controversial decision, whatever it is, but at least she's not running for cover.
But Kendall, let me ask you, could she have made this announcement before today? As we pointed out, a lot of people who've been following this expected a grand jury to convene possibly tomorrow.
Well, she could have made the decision a week ago, but I think what has happened as she has focused on the case, she is now getting very, very close to a decision on prosecution or not. And one of the first things she had to decide in reaching that decision is whether it's going to be a grand jury. I think we're getting very, very close, Tamron, to the hour of decision here.
Michael, let me bring you in. I want to play what Ben Crump, the family's attorney, the Martin family's attorney, was on with Andrea Mitchell a short time ago. This was his reaction to the news of no grand jury.
We're anticipating that they were not going to do it in a grand jury because we really felt from the beginning they had enough evidence to affect probable cause to do an arrest. Not a conviction of George Zimmerman who killed Trayvon Martin, but an arrest. And it's a situation that we are hopeful that because she didn't do this grand jury, that there will be an arrest soon.
So, Michael, Ben Crump also had said from the beginning he really didn't want a grand jury because he felt it was a private proceeding and that a grand jury would be bad for this case. What's your reaction to that, Michael?
I agree with Kendall that the grand jury would have provided political cover, and I think she's bold in waving that off and saying, no, she can make this determination without the grand jury. A second interpretation is that she might think that it's superfluous because perhaps the presumption is that Zimmerman would take the Fifth Amendment and that witnesses don't need to be compelled to provide testimony to the grand jury because they're cooperating, and therefore she has all the tools at her disposal that she would have had with or without a grand jury, so why go through that process?
John, let me get you in on it. How concerned are you that the language of even political cover or cover is being used or even needed in this because of the attention, quite honestly, but that it is now a part of deciding if she made the right or wrong call here?
Well, certainly, I think for political cover purposes, she probably should have gone before the grand jury. Although I'm not offended that she has not done so in large measure, because, look, it's not just a question of probable cause here. If you're the prosecutor, you need to know that you can do more than make a probable cause and get an arrest, because once you make that decision, your office is on the line. So from my point of view, she needs to make sure that, and she wants to make sure she has more than probable cause, but she has enough to get a conviction for whatever charge it's going to be. So in making this decision, I think was appropriate. I also think that the investigation is something that's kind of wrapping up as well.
And let me get you to follow up, John, because earlier this morning on the Today Show, George Zimmerman's attorneys were on, and they pointed out that people are saying, well, they just want an arrest. They want the process to go through with an arrest. And his attorneys are saying, look, that is not how the process works, that people believe that they can watch Law and Order and maybe figure out the legal system, but that is, according to them, not the process.
Well, he's correct there. I'm a former prosecutor as well as doing defense work. I know that the prosecutor is supposed to make a decision not on probable cause, but based upon their belief that they can get a conviction based upon reasonable doubt. That doesn't always happen, of course, but you need more than probable cause at this stage of the proceedings. I know the family would like for an arrest to occur, but that family would be very, very disappointed if it turns out the prosecution just has probable cause, because they will find that he was found not guilty. So prosecution needs more than that.
Well, Kendall, let me bring you in, because the Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network released a statement, and they're saying that this decision to not have the grand jury vindicates the position that they've taken all along, that you do not need a grand jury to make an arrest of George Zimmerman on probable cause.
Correct. No, sorry.
Well, I think that it certainly is clear that you don't need a grand jury. In fact, most of the time you wouldn't be using a grand jury for these kind of charges. In terms of what the standard is, I agree with the comment just made. Now that it's in the hands of a special prosecutor, the special prosecutor, of course, considers probable cause. But she's also to consider whether there is a sufficient prospect of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And as we know, that's a more demanding standard, and that is part of the responsibility of Angela Corey at this hour.
And Michael, you have such a unique position in that you talk to people all day from across the country on radio, but you're also an attorney. At this point, what are you hearing from, I hate to use the term middle America here, but you have these polls out that indicate there's a great divide in how Republicans and Democrats and blacks and whites are seeing this case and the coverage.
I'm so glad you asked me that, because I just concluded an hour-long conversation about the case, and what I find distressing is that people are hoping for, praying for a particular outcome, and I think that's the wrong approach. I think what we should all be hoping for is that facts will be forthcoming and that intelligent decisions can then be made by the judicial process. But I'm really troubled by people who are predisposed toward believing that they know what happened, whether it's a pro-Trayvon Martin or a pro-Zimmerman perspective, when at this juncture, none of us know.
Absolutely. But Kendall, you know the law, you know how it works in your state. What should we look out for next? What is the next logical move here?
Well, I think we're going to get an announcement before anything, you know, in terms of more buzz, more thing. I think things are getting very tight-lipped precisely because we're getting close. And what I hope happens with the announcement, no way to say how it's going to be handled or how it's going to be presented, is that there is an explanation. because if she doesn't bring charges, we all want to know why. And if she does bring charges, it's got to be clear to those in America who think that maybe she would be bringing charges in response to strong community pressures, that to the contrary, she's basing it upon the facts and the law of the case. So prosecutors don't have to, but this time I hope she will give an explanation.
Well, John, you have some reports, and no one, to Kendall's point, knows for sure, but you have some reports that claim there could be an arrest this week. All of that very premature, obviously, given even the surprise of the announcement today. But what are you watching for, John, to be the next move here?
Well, I think that the only thing you can really hope for is an announcement of some kind, because, you know, obviously prosecutors don't have to explain, but given the high visibility of this case and given how people have made, it will be important for her to be very definitive about the decision she makes, either pro or con, for or not, because no matter what, she's going to catch a lot of emotional and heat as a consequence from all sides of the spectrum. I agree with the earlier person who said, look, you know, having been involved in one of these cases out here in Oscar Grant where a young man was shot and killed by the police, people form opinions based upon how they think the results should come out, and they make those both socially or politically. Often it's going to be up to the prosecutor to make a decision based upon the evidence. That's a difficult charge sometimes when you have all this kind of emotion, but hopefully she can do that.
All right, thank you, John, Michael, Kendall. Great pleasure having all three of you on. Thank you.